Hello, and today we're going to be looking at something a bit interesting. I came up with this idea when I was rewatching like the most recent WICSO videos, and I kind of wanted to do an alternate ending to WW4. Now, in the WICSO timeline, obviously the Square Alliance and the coalition of democratic nations were technically the winners, with like over here, Brazil, like the Circle team came out on top. But I kind of wanted to explore a different scenario where the fascists actually win. And my main focus on the pivotal change here is going to be with how India deals with the line team and how the fascist support for the line team changes in this scenario compared to in our WICSO timeline, where India decided to release the red team and the old empire formed, and the old empire and India managed to fight back against the line team together. And the fascists just didn't really care too much about India. The Ethiopians were too busy on this front. The West Africans are too busy getting defeated by the Dark Sign team, and we're trying to push this back up here. And obviously the brown team was focused in Europe, where it probably focus should be. Now, I don't know what happened in the actual WICSO, but this country here is fascist. They were fascist before the war started. I can't be asked to look for the video if that ideology changed, but they were fascist at some point. And we're going to say that either they're fascist now and they join the Parallelogram Alliance, or they're like a flawed democracy and their government changed, but funding and attention from the Parallelogram Alliance put in a new fascist leader. And we're going to go ahead and see this blue Bangladeshi country go ahead and join the Parallelogram Alliance. Why did he choose such a terrible shape to pronounce? And there we go. And this will have butterfly effects, everlasting effects, and will change the outcome of this war, this one country right here joining the war. And in this turn, we see India, rather than, like in actual WICSO, as I said, releasing the red team, we see a rise in Indian nationalism, as India doesn't want to seem weak to the world stage by having to release a country. And the Indian government ultimately makes the decision, the very close decision, to keep the red team, the old empire land, in a way, under its own decision, which, to be honest, is India shooting itself in the foot. Because in this scenario, while we do see India make some gain over here, managing to push back the invasion forces, which actually should be in this color, eventually, these advances are pushed back by the line team, as we see over here that this blue country catches India basically by surprise, which is pretty dumb because there's a fascist country on your border and you won't expect them to invade you. But this spells doom for India, as while this country is much weaker than India, most of Indian forces are now either on the line team trying to focus on the line team, or they're still coming back from Ethiopia, as they were planning to invade here, which by the way technically this should be under Indian control. But they invaded here and then they were called back to defend the motherland after the Line Rebellion. But what it does spell is the eventual defeat for Persia over here, as well as the line team manages to push India back as Indian morale depletes, especially after this land is invaded and this land is cut off, which eventually leads to millions of troops, or hundreds of thousands of troops being captured by Indian forces. This event has morale boosts all across the fascist nations, which does allow the brown team to manage to divert their attention over here with a sigh of relief, as the Farmers Union is kicked out and invaded from the north by both the green team and the brown team. And now the valiant charge over here by the Dark Sign team, it doesn't go their way, and we see them be completely kicked out of not only West African land, but West African also invades them and basically forces them to capitulate, as we see they only exist up here, which is eventually invaded by Palpatine forces in an attempt to stop complete control by West Africa. I would just like to point out that this country, don't remember, this is Northern France, which means it's part of the Parallelogram Alliance, but these square countries are all eliminated, and I will actually just go ahead and remove the squares for now for convenience and to ease any confusion. But going back over to India, we see this pocket completely freed of line team rebellions. As we also see over here, the line team eventually take the Persian capital, as a huge morale boost is swept through the country, as it looks like India is not having a fun day, as we see continued groups rise up against India, and eventually a huge front nears the capital down here. And we also see many millions troops, maybe hundreds of thousands at least troops defect over here in the east, as we see continued advances made by the blue team, as up in the north, the blue and the green team eventually meet. And this news is spread around the world, as fascist countries are using this victory in India against the number one strongest country, may I add, as propaganda to increase morale, as millions of more fascist soldiers, fascist citizens sign up to fight for their country, and fascism is on the rise, and it looks like it's going increasingly bad for the Square Team Alliance. Over here we see continued progress made by the Gold Team, as they basically almost completely take control of the Red Country, with allied parallelogram forces occupying the rest of these countries. Eventually, after weeks, if not months of fighting, we eventually see the Indian capital fall to the Line Rebellion. And in the weeks that follow, we see many provinces surrender to Line Team and Blue Team provinces as Blue Team forces, as victory is announced in India, and the fascists have defeated the Indian democracy, and it's looking increasingly bad for the democracies of the world. However, it's important to note that not all of India falls, as many Indian loyalists still rise up, and many militant groups still resist against the forces. But globally, on a map, the fascists have had an overwhelming victory in India. Now, going over to the Old Empire, obviously in our time like WICSO, the Old Empire was released by India. But in this one, the Old Empire will still be coming back, but this time the Old Empire is going to go ahead and have to rebel itself. And over the following weeks, we see the same thing happen in normal WICSO. We see all four provinces of the Old Empire eventually come under the form of the Red Team. And this is where we go ahead and see this union, and we see the birth of the Old Empire. However, in this timeline, not every country that joined in WICSO timeline joins the Old Empire. Up here we see that these two countries don't join the Old Empire, the Caucasus country doesn't join the Old Empire, and significantly this country over here doesn't join the Old Empire, which means that the Old Empire does not have a coastline to go ahead and do here. And the reason these countries have done it is because they don't think that they can win. They think joining the Old Empire will assure their destruction, as without India's protection, the Old Empire will have to fight a multi-front war by itself with no allies in the region. We do, however, see this Sinai country over here eventually go ahead and join, which does open up this front, which Old Empire quickly takes advantage of, using their brand new military to make some pretty impressive gains over here. We also do see them start the invasion of this puppet country, but without the southern border, this is actually quite hard to do, as the Ethiopians have now had time to go ahead and militarize this land, which allows them to keep control of this. Unlike in real WICSO where they were instantly kicked off, they still have a foothold, which will prove to be an annoyance to the Old Empire. We do, however, see the Old Empire make some gains over here, but as the Line Team begins to further militarize its army, we will eventually see the Old Empire have to come force with almost all of the Line Team forces. With this huge morale boost, we see successful invasions from both the Blue Team and the Green Team. We also see the Brown Team continue to pour into the Farmers Union, with the Brown Team even managing to kick out the Purple Team completely from their territory, with Brown Team special forces invading the north of the Alps up here. We see continued Gold Team advancements, with them even managing to take over the Red Country and pushing out here. We also see continued gold advancements in Tanzania as the Allied forces are pushed back, even threatening the capital over here. Now, a new front opens up over here. As you can see, there's a border between these countries here. Now, I don't know if there was actual fighting in WICSO, but if there wasn't any relevant fighting. But in this timeline, the orange team and the gold team, but with this huge morale boost and with everyone enlisting in the army, they send their soldiers in here and they quickly pour into this country, which these countries were kind of unprepared. They were focusing on supplying this border over here, which obviously isn't going well. And this spells pretty big disasters for these two countries, as the blue team, the teal team country over here's capital is immediately threatened. And after a few weeks, the capital is taken, and as forces pour in from the south of this country and split off from its allies, it eventually surrenders over to the two forces, just like that, which is a pretty huge defeat for the trapezoid alliance down in the south of Africa. However, it's not all bad for the square team, as we do see the old empire manage to knock out this puppet, forcing it to completely capitulate before we go ahead and see the gold team push back against the purple team alliance. Eventually, we see Norway completely kicked out of all of Denmark, with the brown team threatening a naval invasion of Denmark, which would be pretty detrimental for the country. Now, going over to France, while up to this point France has kind of only really been focusing on their own area, we do see France seeing the chance that they actually have the luxury to go ahead and invade the purple team. We see combined French, cyan, and brown team troops to some extent invade France, completely cutting them off over here, allowing the West African Union to go ahead and take these islands due to naval superiority, threatening complete naval invasion of this area over here, which would be pretty bad. This does also allow the Dutch to expand their invasion into Rome. However, this is quickly halted as Rome realizes that they need to reorganize themselves, and Rome quickly pushes brown team forces out of the country as a whole, as Rome is not out to fight yet. We also do see Roman forces over here allow the Farmers' Union to have slight pushbacks in the west, although they keep losing land in the east, as what are these called? Parallelogram forces near the capital threatening it. It's at this point where we finally see more countries go ahead and join the old empire after negotiations. However, these countries up here do not go ahead and join the old empire, and it's not looking good for the old empire. As over in India, this resistance group is slowly being crushed and basically massacred at this point up over here. But what's more terrible is that now the line team forces has fully mobilized and are now heading over to Persia, where they eventually arrive and completely kick out the old empire, even in starting to invade into old empire land. However, not all hope is lost. We see Ireland create the coalition of democratic nations, an alliance aimed to stopping the evil of fascism. We see the gold team, the grey team over here, that's technically black, but you know what, grey. We see Sumatra and Borneo over here also go ahead and join this democratic alliance. We also see Greece as well. And alongside Greece, we also see up here Finland go ahead and join this. And now, here's where it differs, because that was all that was joined originally in the old WICSO timeline. But in this timeline, we go ahead and see China's entrance at the very start of this alliance, as China realizes that fascism has gone too far. And China is not the only country that realizes this. We also see America go ahead and join the Circle Team alliance, which are two huge players, which will definitely help the Square Team, the Circle Team, and any other allied democratic forces and communist forces to some extent get back up on their feet. It's at this point where we also see the involvement of a South American front, as all the South American communist nations go ahead and join the Square Team alliance, opening a brand new front for all these countries. However, just like in the WICSO timeline, Brazil is as, if not even more prepared, due to the many more troops signing up to the Brazilian army, due to how successful fascism is in the world right now. We see in an even quicker time, Brazil completely dominate South America as the proving country is knocked out the war in a week. And this like Paraguayish country, yeah, not existing. This country over here, this red country, yep, you're getting invaded. And forces from the brown team are also pretty strong support by Brazil. And in literally like a few weeks, the whole of the South American front is defeated, bar down here, where we see this red country hold out slightly. And I don't know why this capital's here. I'm pretty sure the capital's meant to be up here, but you know, just ignore that. We also see over here a new front open in Australia as the Square Team and the Parallel Team have come over to Oceania, as well as even more Circle Team as Papua New Guinea joins the Circle Team, and they quickly go ahead and invade this land up here, which is, I don't know how, the first win for the Democrats in like, what, in how long? I don't know. And there we go. However, we do see the vastly stronger Red Australia quickly push around the coastline, taking massive amounts of land up here in the north, and even threatening the capital. However, this allied support from Papua New Guinea and surrounding Indonesian countries does allow the Blue Australians to go ahead and push back, although they are still getting absolutely destroyed down here in the south, with Red Australia even reaching what is now Perth in the modern world. After a few weeks, we do go ahead and see that both Tibet and this orange country over here go ahead and join on the side of democracy. And you know what that is met by? Yeah, I don't know what he's trying to do that. The capital is immediately taken by the Lion Team, which prompts Red Tibet to go ahead and just invade the rest of this country and occupy it. If you thought that was the extent, the climax of this war, then you'd be wrong. Because in Vietnam, we go ahead and see an uprising. We see the government, the flawed democracy government, the flawed democratic government overthrown. And guess which radical ideology is now in place? If you guess fascism, then you'd be absolutely correct. As we see Vietnam join the Parallelogram alliance, and a brand new front over here is opened. We quickly see Chinese troops pour into northern Vietnam after this, as despite basically every other country, China knew that there could be the chance that Vietnam would be overtaken by fascism, and they prepared troops. But what they didn't really prepare troops was over here, as they didn't really expect much fighting to go over here, as there is kind of mountainous terrains. However, special blue team forces do manage to go ahead and make some advances into China, but not many. We do, however, see advances be slightly made by the blue team over here, however, as the red team does manage to invade into India slightly over here. And now it's getting spicy, as we now have fighting in every single continent, and all the major powers of the world are involved in this war, and this is getting a bit crazy. Eventually, after months of holding out, we do see the Indian resistance eventually fall, as a huge sense of national pride sweeps over both the blue and the Lion Team country. And speaking of the Lion Team country doing pretty well, we see them go ahead and take this capital from the old empire, as the old empire is pushed away from the Caspian Sea. Back in the African front, we see continued progress made by this country, these two countries over here in the Gold Country, as they basically decimate most of this lavender country. We do, however, see some gains, as the South African army has arrived in Tanzania, and the Gold Army is pushed back decently. However, what the South African army is not, we see the Gold Team thrive, as the Gold Team quickly moves into this land, decimating and genociding a pretty high percent of population in both the lavender and the yellow countries, as these two alliances have taken down the lavender country as well. We see with help from the purple country and the red country, this puppet is liberated, as the red country does manage to push the old empire out slightly, not completely out of the territory though. With Greek troops arriving into the Farmers' Union, we do see Ukraine be pushed back over here. I guess that's Ukraine. But we also do see over here some pretty good gains made by southern Ukraine and Mongolian Ukraine, as they do actually manage to take the capital. And in a pretty shocking move to basically everyone, this country goes ahead and surrenders, with the green team having to control as much land as they can. However, this does not stop the brown team, as the brown team continues to make pretty hefty advances in the Farmers' Union, threatening the capital. We do, however, see over here Irish troops pour in to the brown country, taking almost everything, with the brown country only having a tiny little landing there. On the night of July 1st, we see the leader of the West African Union, who is touring around the country, celebrating the victory, but also calling out the Gold Team for their actions committed against the religions over here and the genociding. We see the leader of the West African Union killed in an ambush. This assassination is shown on live television and broadcast to the whole world, and the world gasps. The world is so shocked at this event, and this has everlasting effects. First of all, a more fascist, a more extreme, a more nationalistic leader is put in place in the West African Union, funded by Ethiopia. We also see a surge in nationalism in every fascist country, as the fascists feel they must get revenge for the leader, who they believe has been assassinated by a Democrat and anti-fascist. However, the truth is that the Ethiopians were actually behind this assassination, and as the Ethiopians discovered plans made by the West African leader, go ahead and betray Ethiopia and nuke them, which in our timeline did happen, as Ethiopia was defeated after West Africa nuked all of their nuclear silos, so they couldn't nuke any of their allies. However, in this scenario, West Africa still has their nukes. However, I'm not going to go into a nuclear war in this scenario, as I just don't really like doing nuclear wars, so we're going to say that nobody used their nukes. This sort of turn in like the tides of the war, with advances in Ukraine, Ireland, and over here by China, does eventually lead to the Caucasus country and this like blue Turkish country go ahead and joining the old empire, as we do see the old empire eventually kick the Gold Team out of their land, and they also push back the Line Team ever so slightly. We also do see the old empire quickly invades these two countries, which does go ahead and force the Gold Team sending their own troops to take over this land over here. However, over on this front, it might look like there's a massive front line, but despite the Line Team making some advances with Tibet being completely pushed out and getting pushed into, not much fighting happens in the war. This is a giant mountain range, and although I don't really address geography that much, I think it is a bit prevalent that this Tibet country, despite looking kind of massive, not much fighting happens over here, as it's just mountains. Although over here is where the main show happens, because we have one more country, one long-life enemy of China, one filled with hatred, join the Parallelogram Alliance, declaring that they will return to former glory. We have Korea go ahead and join the Parallelogram Alliance. We quickly see Korean troops invade this poor purple country up here, which does not deserve this treatment, in order the fact that they can invade China, and they begin their invasion. And China, despite having prepared for Vietnam, they didn't prepare for Korea. Korea is a full democracy, or at least that's what the world thinks. Turns out Korea has been ruled by a dictator behind everyone's back. The government is just a puppet government, and nobody has realised. This does cause China to not only lose morale, but they do have to pull back some of their troops down in the south, which does allow Vietnam to push out most of China from its country in order for China to push back over here. We also do see China basically go ahead and occupy the rest of this country. And they just occupy the rest of the country. However, we do see in Europe the Pink Team actually eventually send supplies into here, invaded into both these countries, which does force the Gold Team to withdraw some troops to go ahead and kick the Pink Team out of their country. We do see some small pushbacks by the Grey Team as well, however, not much. Eventually, after long months of fighting, we do eventually see the collapse of the Farmers' Union as the Brown Team takes the capital and the country surrenders to the Brown Team forces. This does prompt, however, with Greece to go ahead and invade the south of the country, occupying it over like that. We also do see the Purple Team sending some forces to go ahead and occupy some of the Farmers' Union, but they don't manage to occupy much, as they still have to fight the Brown Team. In the following weeks, however, we see Greece have decisive victories, as it seems the Brown Team's presence in the Farmers' Union is basically non-existent, as the Green Team is pushed back by Allied forces. And even over here, we see the Brown Team have slight losses across the border, especially over here in France, as we do see that the Yellow Team is pushed back completely, well, almost completely, by France over here. And everyone is wondering, what is going on? Brown Team troops are being called back to the capital, but what are they being called back for? And it's on the night of December the 25th. Christmas, a time of joy, where we see the Brown Team launch its biggest military operation yet. We see the Brown Team send hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of troops into Norway, as Norway is quickly invaded from all fronts. And in 4 days, we see the complete, utter collapse of Norway, as the Norwegian government surrenders over to the Brown Team, and one of the world's top powers is knocked out, in only 4 days. Now, this is huge. Not only does this prompt Irish forces to go ahead and make a pretty big push to push the Brown Team off of the country, but this does have widespread, again, for the 1000th time I'm mentioning the word morale, I feel like I mentioned it enough, but you get how morale works. Everyone is excited in the Parallelogram Alliance. The fascism have had a huge breakthrough, and the Brown Team can now refocus its attention down here, as the Brown Team begins its invasion into the Purple Team up in the north. As we see special forces go into the Alps, and over here, as we see the Brown Team actually managed to make a huge push and cut the Purple Team off, and these troops are eventually squeezed out, which is a huge loss to the Purple Team. However, over in Arabia, we do still see the old empire actually manage to push the Gold Team out of Arabia. However, they can never manage to launch a successful naval invasion over here. We see up north the Brown Team go ahead and invade the Pink Country, taking back this capital, managing to push it back, which does allow the democracies over here to make some advances into the country. We also see a huge naval invasion done by the Dutch up into Finland. We see the Finnish capital be captured, and in a matter of weeks, we see most of the Finnish core territory overrun by an overwhelming amount of Dutch special trained forces troops. As Finland, I don't really know why they joined. It was a bit dumb. Finland is not really a strong country. They relied on Norway, like as a duo. They're a pretty decent duo, but without Norway, Finland basically collapses over to the Brown Team as another win for the Brown Team. We do, however, go ahead and see Ireland up here manage to take all of Iceland after a successful naval operation. And going back over to South America, we do see the rest of this red country go ahead and fall. In China, we see continued victories made by both Korea and Vietnam, with Korea actually going on a man-man invading this country over here, quickly sweeping it, despite China's warning for this country to mobilize. They never did, thinking that Korea would never invade them, but eventually this country surrenders to Korea. We also see continued work done by Vietnam as they completely kick China out of the country and begin their own invasion, planning to even take Taiwan, although the Chinese military is far superior in terms of navy than the Vietnam military. We do see Line Team manage to actually make some advances over here, completely kicking the Reds out of this country, even managed to push into the Tibetans, despite the terrible terrain. Over here, we see a Line Team naval landing onto old Empire core soil go particularly well, as they actually managed to take the city and pose a real threat. This causes the old Empire to quickly pull out of the Pink Country, as they send forces back here to try and kick the Lime team out, as they almost do successfully, but the Lime team actually manages to hold out in both the city and their original landing point. We also see the Lime team make progress up here, as they basically have the full might of the Indian military under their control now, as many more people have begun to support this new government, which has been putting in new changes, which is making the quality of life in India better than it is during the rebellion. We also see up here Golden Ukraine being beat back with the capital being retaken over here. We also see Rome basically pulling out of here in order to protect the mainland, which does cause Greece to get beat back a lot over here and also over here, as the capital is retaken. And also, if you're looking at this, by the way, and thinking, how is this country gaining all this land? Keep in mind, this is also a country in the Parallelogram Alliance, but I'm just using one colour for it right now. And also, they do have troops and support from the Brown team. They have troops from all fascist countries, even from like the African ones as well. And speaking of Africa, going down here, we see continued victories made by Africa as this capital is taken, and it doesn't look like the gold team is getting stopped anytime soon. It's at this point in the war where we see golden Ethiopia completely withdraw out of Tanzania. We see them withdraw out the yellow country, we see them withdraw out the purple country, and the world is confused. What has just happened? But the Trans-World Alliance doesn't actually care, because they can actually just go ahead and push this country out. That was the gold country. This country is now getting pushed back, which, by the way, I know this is a different country, don't use the same colour. And we see continued advances made by both the purple country, as well as even this country to some extent pushing out in here. And the war is running. What is going on? Why is the gold country just pulled out of hundreds of kilometers of land? And that is because they are hoping to end this war. The Ethiopians realize if they can knock the old empire out of the war, they can definitely secure the victory. We see the largest scale operation in WICSO history happen. We see millions of golden Ethiopian troops cross into Asia, as we see a large-scale invasion happen, as many naval invasions take place along the coastline, as many major cities are captured by the gold team. We see the Lime team push in the full might of their army into the old empire as they near the capital. We also see hundreds of thousands of troops arrive in here as the old empire is looking like it's about to collapse. We see continued advances made by the gold team over here, as it looks like the old empire's capital is going to be taken. We eventually see huge successes over here, leading to the enclosement, encircling of these troops, which is a huge blow to the old empire army. And boom, just like that, the old empire's capital is taken, and the old empire is split in two. And over the following months, the northern territories of the old empire are slowly invaded by the Lime team and the gold team, as the old empire in the north completely falls over to fascist forces. We also see fascist forces make successes down here in the south, although they aren't as impressive, as the old empire still holds out down here. With the victory in the old empire, we see golden troops re-invade this land over here, although they are faced with basically the full might of the Trans-World Alliance, as there's a bit of stalemate over here. See continued success over here by Vietnam as they near the capital, and the war support in China, as it always is at an all-time low, and the Chinese government is in shambles, and their military is failing. China is the third highest country at the start of the World War IV, the third strongest country. However, it is being beaten up by three mediocre powers. And why is this? Well, this is because China isn't actually as strong as it looks. The government is weakening, and the government had been losing support all to the build-up of World War IV. And after China joined the war and fighting actually hit home mainland China, the war support became non-existent. And it's at this point where we see the government of China thrown out, and a new government is put in place, which agrees to a ceasefire with Korea as China leaves the Circle Team Alliance and the war. And something I've just realised, which is a pretty silly mistake, is that this is also Circle Team, but this is a different Circle Team, and this should really be Parallelogram. So I'm sorry if I confused everyone, but hopefully everyone realised, because hopefully you've watched WICSO, and if you haven't, this video makes no sense to you. So you should probably go watch that. If you're watching this point in, then you already know what WICSO is. Yeah, we see China completely leave the war as they hand over all of this country to, to Korea. And with China's fall and the continued loss of land by the old empire, the democratic countries of the world know that they have lost this war. South America is taken. Australia, well, speaking of Australia, the Red Australia manages to take the capital, causing Blue Australia to capitulate, despite not being able to actually take this back from Papua New Guinea over here. So, South America, Australia have been completely dominated by fascism. Asia, the fascists have won. We still see over here these Indonesian countries hold out, but for how long will that be? Well, we'll find out after I'm done speaking. India won, and that's part of Asia. The Middle East basically won. Europe, the fascists are dominating, although there are still a few little powers that need to be destroyed. The only real place I'd say democracies are winning is in England. And if England is your only big accomplishment, then you don't have any accomplishments. I know. I'm from England. I was born in England, but yeah, fascists are dominating. And speaking of fascist domination, going down here, we see successful naval landings made by Vietnam and allies, as all of the Sumatra is invaded, as well as Borneo is invaded in a few months due to, obviously it's a rainforest, so it's quite hard because there'll be guerrilla warfare. But again, guerrilla warfare in Vietnam as well, and eventually this country surrenders to the democratic nations. And on the 1st of January, we see democratic nations are called to the capital of Ireland in Dublin. We see America, Ireland, China, Tibet, Rome, Greece, and Papua New Guinea are all called to Ireland, as we see them sit down and realise that they have lost this war. And on the 2nd of January, we see an official declaration of peace made by the democratic countries and the Square Team Alliance as they officially surrender over to Parallelogram and fascist forces, as the fascists have won the war. And there we go. After 40 minutes of drawing this new world, this is what it looks like. I'm going to talk through this because this is a lot to go through. We'll go continent by continent. Okay, starting with North America. Nothing happened. North America was the only continent. I think that was so fine. South America. Now, you might think this is a victory, but I will say in this peace treaty, the fascists were super, super harsh to the communists, their mortal enemy, compared to the democracies. Well, actually, I think in some places, some democracies were actually given land. But you can easily see literally every single communist country was Iranic, split by the three fascist countries, except this one down here, which got off by the skin of its teeth down here. And, yeah, we have this huge, giant country over here, which I'm kind of loving, and then we have an absolutely monolith of a Brazil. Now, going over to Europe, where a lot of this fighting happened, we see, first of all, let's go over what the democracy actually got. We see over here that we actually did see the Ireland actually gained this land over here, which is actually pretty nice, this land. Now, going over to here, we see that the Dark Sign country's been eliminated, and West Africa is basically all of, well, it has all of South Spain. And we see this country does get to exist over here, which I think is actually the wrong colour. Yeah, there we go. And we see this pretty nice blob France, although it does look a bit weird because of the brown team. But yeah, we see this giant France take up a lot of this country over here, and the Rome team. And look at Rome. Rome has been obliterated. Yeah, Rome lost this coastline. The brown team now has access to the Mediterranean, and the brown team is absolutely ginormous. If we scroll out, the brown team basically has all of France over here, has all of Germany, has basically all of Poland, and it now has two puppet states. We have this is like the Polish puppet state, which isn't really in Poland anymore, so that's a bit awkward. But we also have up here where we have Sweden as a puppet of the Dutch, which means that Norway has been pretty reduced and lost all this land over here and all Denmark. Going in here, we see the Bulgaria, a neutral country, has actually gained a lot of land, and we also see the Greece only lost like. Hold on, let me get black. Greece had like this land, and that's about it, like this land over here, so it didn't really lose like anything. So Greece has got off pretty scot-free. Although this border is annoying me, but I can't best. Then going over to the Farmers Union, which for some reason has like 17 different colours in it, we see the Farmers Union has been absolutely decimated. Yeah, it's been pretty reduced. It lost land from literally every single side except over here with its border with its ally. And now looking over here, we have a huge blob. We have these two countries, which are not only are they a huge blob, but we're going to have to see we're entering the age of unity. No, I don't know what entering the age of, but these countries are going to unify, and we're going to have the return of a form of Russian country, which is going to be pretty cool. With the capital here, we now have a giant Russia, and these countries should all fear for their safety from this. And Finland also got off scot-free. I think all they lost is this island, which might have actually belonged to Norway, but it was coloured Finland when I was doing the peace treaty. I think that's going to do it for Europe. I think actually, hold on. We do. The brown team still does retain Iceland. I just forgot to colour it in. And yeah, we see the brown team make huge gains over here in the east and in the south. We see France be born. We see West Africa claim most of Iberia. We see the purple team basically reduced to just Italy and Yugoslavia. We see a nice Bulgaria up here. Like if we go back to the start, I guess not the start. That's like before World War IV at all. When we look at these like games, we see the brown team like again, all Denmark, pretty good games. We see the Farmers Union destroyed. We see a huge Russia, which I think is pretty cool, and we see Bulgaria coming out of nowhere. So that's kind of fun. Then moving over to Africa, we see an absolutely ginormous gold team Africa up here. We see gold team gain northern Tanzania. We see they gain all the red country over here. I was tempted to make this country unite with Gold Africa, but I didn't know if that was too big of a land, so I just left it like this. But this green country got a pretty good chunk of land, while the purple country up here did also gain land from this country. And we also see Africa have now, well, we see the gold country now have a foothold in Arabia, a pretty big one. We also do see them take back this land from India, so yeah, that's something. We'll see them take over these random islands which didn't even exist. But keeping in Africa, obviously there's no alliances, like the alliances are gone, these are previous alliances are gone now. We see over here that these two countries actually unify, and we see the formation of the Gold Coast country. Which you know, these countries should probably this country especially should probably watch out because it's probably get invaded if I had to guess of what would happen in the future. We see their what? That was weird. We see their capital be placed over here in like the center of the country, and yeah, we now have a pretty formidable. We now have some pretty big countries in Africa. Technically 4. And speaking of Libya over here, we do see Libya have some gains like that. And if let me show the whole of Africa doing this thing. Let me see that. So we see some pretty good gains for the fascist people. But now going over to Asia, going to this mess. I mean, I can't really show this. They basically reverse basically the old borders, really. The only difference is up here, we actually see this democratic country be given land from Caucasia. Caucasia split into two, and we also see this blue country down here split into two. But other than that, we don't see much change in terms of borders, really. Like over here, we see land lost from here, but it's mainly the same as it was before. Obviously, we still have like the occupation. We have the Lime team occupy this, basically replacing India. We have this. What is that? Oh, this is Vietnam, which we'll go to in a second. And then we have the gold team here, and then we have the Dutch. We have the 4 major fascist powers of the world. That's why I call it 4 major powers. Obviously, there's like the West African Union is up there, as well as like this new Gold Coast country. But I'd say that Vietnam tops them, and obviously the other 3 powers are definitely the strongest. And speaking of the Lime country, prepare for this. The Lime country has been restored to its historical height. Every like Lime citizen, everyone that has like ancestors, has been. This is like basically like the borders. I think this is slightly bigger than they were at their peak in terms of like actually in Asia, excluding the colonies. Like this is like my WICSO me is so happy to see this. Although I did draw this. We also did see that Tibet lost a bit of land. Like, there's an orange country here that got rid of because I didn't like it. It looked ugly. Tibet lost some land, but going over here, we do see that China got wrecked. We see this giant blue Bangladeshi blob form, which I think is pretty funny. We see a Vietnam empire. Do you see Vietnam take over like half of Indonesia, with Borneo and Sumatra, and Borneo and Sumatra go ahead and combine to create this country over here, which could maybe unite Indonesia, who knows. And now we see Taiwan and some of this land given. Like if I scroll out, we see a giant Korea as well. Look at that, look how much bigger Korea got. Korea gained so much land. And we also see Vietnam, the line team comes out of nowhere. But yeah. And then going down here, going down to the very bottom, we do see, hold on, did I forget to do I might have actually forgotten. Hold on. Okay, going here, we do see that Papua New Guinea actually gained some land from the red team, but overwhelmingly we see the red team unite all of Australia under a communist banner. And let me colour that in. And just like that, Australia is united, and we now have a giant Australian power, which I don't know how strong Australia is in WICSO, but just look at that. That is our world map. Before versus after, we have the huge rise of fascist powers. Sorry, I'm just laughing at America. America just does not change. But yeah, the main highlights: Lime team, Russia, Vietnam, Gold Coast country, like this country over here. We have some now giant fascist countries as the world is entering a new age, a new order, with the only real democratic power that remains is America, and I find that absolutely hilarious.